Right. Is the recording started? Yep. See it. Okay.
I've
Right.
just started,
Okay.
yep.
Right. Thanks everyone, and welcome to the Leadership Board meeting. I have to read out the small statement at the front, simply because the meeting's been recorded, and it's the first meeting of the Leadership Board that's been recorded. And we've confirmed that the recording has started. We're not able to hold our meetings at our usual location due to the government guidance and public health measures to tackle COVID. I can advise that the recording of this meeting will be available to watch on the Renfrewshire Council's website following the meeting. As the meeting has been recorded, and for clarity of the okay, that's fine. And for clarity of recording, can I ask that all microphones are muted except for the person who is speaking? Any noise, the camera tends to pick that up and shifts to them. There may be a short lag in between when the camera moves between the speakers, and I would ask that members use the chat box primarily to indicate a question and also to indicate which item they want to come in on, and also not to post up questions for items we've not reached yet, because that just confuses the system. And again, there may be a small lag as we all try and search for the relevant page, so just have to bear that in mind as well. And I'll intend to bring in the relevant officers on each question if asked. And again, members who are accessing by phone should also put their microphones, their phones on mute. And before we move on to the actual agenda, can I ask the clerk to do a roll call of who's all at the meeting? Thanks.
Thanks, convener. By telephone, we're joined by Councillor Jacqueline Cameron, and by Teams, Councillors Devine, Andy Doig, Hart, Hughes, James McLaren, McEwen, McGurk, McIntyre, McNaughton, Nicholson, Patterson, Shaw and Sheridan. And I apologise, I didn't see Councillor McCartan joining the meeting either, so she's not present.
Okay, that's fine. Do we have any apologies? I'm just going through the format here. David,
none intimated to me, none. Convener.
Okay. Any declarations of interest?
Me, please, Ian.
Okay.
Okay. Can I declare an interest in items 1, 7, and 8 as chair of Renfrewshire Leisure? I don't have a financial interest, so I'll stay for the discussion.
Okay. Any more declaration of interest? Nope. Can we move on to item 1, budget monitoring, revenue capital budget monitoring reports? I'll ask first if there's any questions on this item, or if Alan Russell wants to come in and say a few words on it. No, Eddie, you've got a question. Hello, Eddie, are you there?
Ask him to unmute.
I don't have him on the screen until he unmutes and starts speaking. So we can.
Okay.
How's that?
That's you now. Okay.
Sorry for that. It's in 3.4 bullet point 2. And it's to ask Alan if that's okay. Alan Russell, sorry. In that paragraph, it says here, the Scottish Government has provided in principle confirmation that all reasonable costs will be fully funded. And there's another bit, on that basis, at present, additional costs relating to COVID, and there's an expectation that costs will be met. I've got to say, I'm not happy that we're relying on reasonable additional costs. Somebody will, who will decide on the reasonable additional costs, and what comfort have we got of an expectation? Because it says further up there that we may reach £20 million deficit, if I'm reading it properly, and I'm sure Alan will tell me if I'm not. That would obviously be pretty devastating for Renfrewshire Council, for us.
Okay. Alan, do you want to come in and respond to that? I think there might even be a wee update on that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Happy to do so, Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, I mean, very valid points, Councillor Devine, that you've raised there. In terms of the COVID response across Scotland, the impact on health and social care partnerships is one of the most significant areas, and for Renfrewshire, that was estimated at approximately £20 million. That is subject to ongoing review and expectation of change as we move forward, as the response to the pandemic develops. And I know David Leese and his management team are working extremely closely with providers as part of that response. The update that Councillor Nicholson's just referring to, I just late last night that a conversation with the Chief Financial Officer from the Health and Social Care Partnership in relation to the regular monitoring reports that the partnership are feeding into the Scottish Government as part of the local mobilisation plans, and that provides an ongoing assessment of the forecast costs moving forward. That's been subject to the latest iteration and has been informed by detailed engagement that's been occurring with providers over the past couple of months in relation to supplier sustainability payments that are operating as part of the national response. As a consequence of that, we are expecting the updated forecast for the Health and Social Care Partnership to reduce from 20 to 14 million pounds as part of that latest iteration, and that's reflecting a lower level of costs that is expected to feed through from suppliers as part of supporting the provider sector in adult social care. So we are at the moment expecting that cost to reduce as we move forward. That, of course, is just like the Council's wider exposure to COVID costs could be subject to change, particularly as we move through the winter period, and if indeed there are further challenges for the adult social care sector moving forward. As I said, the health and social care are fully participating in the national monitoring arrangements that the government have put in place in relation to adult social care and IGBs generally, that are monitoring these costs on a monthly basis. The government are releasing tranches of funding as part of that process each month as the actual costs come through, and therefore we are seeing funding flowing through from the government. I think given the variability in the potential costs over the course of the full year, I think the government are probably sensibly taking the view that they will release funding as actual costs come through, recognising the potential for variability in that. So at the moment, the government have given that commitment as part of the overall arrangements for responding to COVID to IGBs, and indeed the IGB itself in Renfrewshire wrote and sought additional clarification from the government in relation to that funding commitment, and that's been, as far as I'm aware, responded to and reinforced in terms of the overall funding commitment that's been given. So I think what I would say, Councillor Devine, is I expect that position will continue to move. The adult social care sector in particular through winter months is subject to significant pressures in normal circumstances, and obviously this is quite exceptional and unique circumstances that we'll experience this year, and that monitoring arrangement will continue. So at the moment, the budget monitoring report reflects that commitment from the government, and that has been followed up specifically with IGB for further confirmation, and that's the basis on which we've outlined the position in the budget monitoring report.
Okay, you all right with that, Councillor Devine?
Well, obviously £14 million is a lot better than £20 million, but it doesn't give me any comfort that we could still be. And I know as Alan said, here it says things could go up or down depending on how the winter goes, but £14 million to Renfrewshire Council is just not sustainable. So I'm glad we're keeping an eye on this, and it's something that obviously we'll all be watching to see, because Renfrewshire Council needs to be funded with what it needs to clear our debts and run the council. That's more important to me.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre, a question? 3.4.
Yeah, thanks, convener. My question is on bullet point 1, the 4.5 million figure for the additional costs for Renfrewshire Leisure. We know, thankfully, that we're able to operate in some capacity, and what the operational restrictions impact's going to be. I'm just concerned that we don't know what the behavioural impact is in people using our centres, and what impact that's going to have on the fee-based income. And I just wonder if we could have comment on that, and whether that figure could deteriorate further. And then on bullet point 2 on the health and social care partnership, the first sentence, it says measures including substantial levels of support to external care providers in order to ensure their ongoing financial sustainability. I just wonder if we could have a brief description of what that is and what the level of support is over and above what we would usually have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we'll take the first point first. And I think Victoria may be best to answer that point about behavioural use and patterns. Is Victoria there?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Nicholson. So, Councillor McIntyre, you're absolutely right. We are not able to predict the behavioural impact of COVID-19 in terms of people returning to our services and the confidence that they have for that. What I would say in terms of the figure that's stated within the report, it's our hope that we will reduce down that figure through as strong a return as we can deliver. We're only in the first few days of operating services which are income generating for us. At the moment, that seems to have been a very positive return, but of course we are experiencing additional restrictions, and we don't quite know what the winter period will bring. And it's not normally a period where we have a strong level of attendance in our leisure centres as we get into the sort of darker nights and the worse weather. So it will take a few weeks to really understand the confidence that we see coming back from customers, to really work through with Alan and his team and our own financial team what the longer term implications might be. But certainly we would like to project that that's a worst case scenario, and that we will try and work that down as far as we can. And of course, as more opportunities come through in terms of grant support through, for example, the cultural industries, etc., anything that we can to offset losses, we're taking every opportunity that we can. And I would also say that in the first couple of days, we've had a number of people joining Renfrewshire Leisure as members or rejoining. So there is certainly an appetite for people to come and use our services, which is very positive. But that is one of the unknowns for us, because that part of our service and business is a discretionary one on the part of residents and customers.
Okay. On the second point, I think may be directed at David Leese.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think in the main those costs relate to the under occupancy that these providers are experiencing. So there's a range of components to the costs that we've been working with all providers to help us calibrate a clear understanding about their financial position. But it mainly relates to additional costs about staffing or shortfalls in income where they've had lower levels of occupancy than they would typically have. So those are the principal elements of cost, but there are other strands to that which we can set out in more detail separately if that would be helpful for the councillor. But the cost calculation, as Alan said in his kind of overarching narrative, is continually being tested with the providers, and has now been revised, as Alan said, down from 20 to 14 million, and we'll continue to work with providers to make sure we have a very open book approach to understanding what those sustainability payments need to be, and confirm what Alan said. Scottish Government have given us a very positive signal that they will fund that, but obviously until such time as the resource comes to us, we're unable to pay that money out. But as Alan also said, we've had two equal shares of a national allocation of 100 million that's come to us, and that money comes to us, and then we support that through that payment through to providers based upon the levels of need that they have.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. You all right with that, Councillor McIntyre?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McLaren, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you. Just a question for Victoria, based on what she was saying there. I imagine it's a little bit difficult to have, even if everybody wanted to return in the same numbers that they were coming to the centres prior to lockdown, with social distancing, you probably have to manage the numbers quite carefully anyway. So, and I dare say your members are aware of that. So they may be not coming back in the same numbers anyway, because of a realization that there won't be quite so many places on your sessions. Is that the case? Okay, Victoria, did you pick that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor McLaren. Actually, I have to say that the team has done a very strong job of trying to retain the capacity levels that we would normally have by reutilising and repurposing spaces within our centres to achieve the same level of gym capacity and the same level of, well, maybe not the same number of fitness classes right now, but certainly we can extend the number of people who are able to attend. And also the opportunities to swim are far in excess of our normal usage figures. We've certainly seen very strong attendance, pretty much 100% capacity at our fitness classes just now. Very strong attendance at swim sessions, which is unusual for us in terms of public swimming, and a steady stream for gym users, which has not been at full capacity, and that is very much in line with other trusts' experience. But I would also say it's probably still a very reasonable return, given that we have not needed to reduce the capacity of the equipment on offer because of the careful reallocation and repurposing of spaces. We're also able to still offer all our classes as buggy-friendly classes and still accommodate children and family swimming too.
Well, I think this is to be commended then, that you can manage not the same numbers as you were doing before, and I'll certainly try and get that information out to the general public, and I'm sure it'll be very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Cameron.
I just wanted to say that I'm here now by Teams, just for the record, and not by phone anymore. That was all. All right, okay, thanks for that. Councillor Doig.
Thanks, Convener. It was kind of in a similar vein to the question posed by Councillor McLaren to Victoria. That I think as we move into the winter time, I mean, when I'm out cycling just now, the weather's still reasonably quite good, and you can still see a lot of people out running as well. But as you move into the October-November period, I think you'll see an increase in gym usage. I mean, I even miss it just now. But I mean, I think as we move into the winter time and it becomes, let's say, a bit more challenging if you want to go out and cycle on the road or run on the road on the pavements, I think hopefully, you'll see a bigger uptake again.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't have any other indications of any questions. So from that, can we agree with the report? I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Item 2, Tackling Poverty, Local Child Poverty Action Plan. Any questions on it? Oh, wait a minute, Councillor Devine, are you using the manual version of the hand?
No, thanks, Ian. No, it was somebody was coming into the meeting or leaving the meeting that came up over the box, so I couldn't see where you could see where.
I know the box is across the bottom, but
this is I was going to say a very good report. It's a very sad report, but I'm looking for some help, and I raised this the other day there, and Louisa Mahan was going to have a look at it. We've got a food bank running in Glenburn just now. It's through Safer Communities, a kind of subgroup. They're doing it. Now they're having to move out the place they're in because there's a preschool and after school business runs out it, and obviously they can't be mixing. So I'm looking to see if we can look seriously at giving them a very small space in the Glenburn Community Centre. So I'm hopeful that when Louisa comes back, I'll be getting some good news, but they're absolutely desperate. The point I'm making is, or I want to make is, that poverty is going to get worse, and I'm talking about people in work, not just people who are unfortunately unemployed. So we really need to be able to at least help some of them with food and so I'd ask somebody to look sympathetically to this group moving into a bit of the Glenburn Community Centre. They don't need to get in the front door. There's a rear door which they're more than happy to use if we can come to some arrangement.
Okay. I agree with your sentiments. I think it's a excellent report, but in the wrong context of the subject matter. It's been well collated, all the work that's going to try and support child poverty in the area. And I think your point about the use of the community centre, I think it's Laura McIntyre would probably pick that up for us and
That's fine.
And have that conversation with you, because I think obviously it's been replicated one or two other places around the area, and anything that supports the COVID programme is an exemption to the use of the current ban on community lets. So I think Laura will pick that up for you at the end of the meeting. Okay,
thanks, Ian.
Okay, thanks. Cathy, are you?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. It's an excellent report, and I really want to thank everybody that's been involved in this. I also want to thank the Energy Advocacy Service. They've secured significant savings for many in our communities. They've also managed to have many write-offs. This is so helpful when you have situations when you have to decide against food or fuel. So I really want to thank them.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions on this item. Can we then agree item 2, tackling poverty reports? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 3, climate emergency arrangements for establishment of climate change subcommittee. Any particular questions on that? If not, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, digital inclusion, digital strategy. Any particular questions? Sorry, Councillor McLaren. Were you waving?
Yeah, thank you. Waving, hands up everywhere.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm interested in this, particularly for the areas of my ward, Bishopton, Langbank in particular. Suffers badly from the poor internet connections throughout the village, and while everybody knows that we're going digital with everything, it kind of means that if the villages are not all connected up with good broadband, then these people will suffer. And I just don't want Langbank to be forgotten, because it is a small village and everything seems to bypass them. So I'm keen to put Langbank on the map here. Okay.
I'll ask the officer. Sorry, I've got a wee echo there. I'll ask the officers to pick that one up. And I know we've got quite a good team within the council that deals specifically with remote streets and remote areas. I've had recourse to speak to myself about a few areas. So if you're happy with that, Councillor McLaren, I'm sure Alan will pick up that question from you today and come back to you with a more detailed explanation as to how we can try and pick up some of the more, or what the programme is to try and pick up the more remote areas within Renfrewshire.
Welcome that information. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Nicholson, I can just very quickly give a bit of an update in relation to that. Just obviously, as part of the digital strategy, part of one of the themes is obviously effectively our infrastructure and their foundations. The theme's called, but our digital infrastructure. You may recall a few months back, the council entered into a connectivity as a service contract, which was focused on the connections to council premises through black fibre and digital fibre infrastructure. Part of that contract, as well as connected council premises, the expectation that contract would act as a catalyst for further private sector investment across the area. And indeed, a partner that's delivering that did announce an intention to deliver a significant further investment beyond what they're investing as part of the council's infrastructure requirements would lead to an additional 700 kilometres of black fibre across the Renfrewshire geography, and we would expect in time that will include connecting the outer areas of Renfrewshire beyond obviously what would be deemed the sort of normal major population centres. So that will place Renfrewshire right at the front end of digital infrastructure across the UK. So I would expect that we will see significant improvements in Renfrewshire over the coming months and years.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Devine, you had a question?
It's more of a kind of statement. A good report, happy with that. But in the poverty report I spoke about, and I'm sure that the rest of the councillors will be the same, and the officers, we're talking about people working people having to rely on food banks. So we have to make sure that people who can't afford to get access to the internet or on a computer, we all need to know, or we all need to find a way of including them, because the worst thing we can do is to isolate them even more than what they are just now, because that will just drive folk, away, and we can't have people hiding away because they're embarrassed not to have food, and then not to have access to some sort of computer that they can get all the messages, and we're sitting here with 40 odd people or some 30 odd people in this. They've not got that access. So I'm pretty sure that most of these would agree that we need to find a way of including all these people in the digital strategy.
Okay, I think Councillor Devine, there's a lot of work being done in that front. There's also a lot of work being done with trying to get digital inclusion as an essential service, like water, electricity, things like that as well. So there's been a lot of work behind all that, and I know that the Scottish Government did put a lot of resources through the COVID pandemic to try and ensure that particularly school children had access to laptops and IT and access to the internet in order to sustain their education. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on that front as well, and I think the council's at the forefront of that, is trying to make sure that there's nobody left out. Nobody's getting the opportunity to join in with, as long as the internet service is there, then what are the barriers to them getting onto it? Because I think that's the way that the whole agenda's going in that front. So I'm quite confident the council's at the front of that, and it has been for a good number of years. Councillor Doig, your next item.
Thanks, Kavina. I think there's been some very cogent and pertinent points made by both Councillor McLaren in relation to poor quality of internet access in the village communities, especially in my ward, Lochlanach and Kilbarchan, have got very bad internet connection. And also I think there's a very valid and wider point being made by Councillor Devine about the fact that increasingly, Convener, everything is happening on screen. Personally, I try to resist this because I think it is the direction we're going in, but nonetheless, I don't think it's good for individuals. It's bad for your eyes, it's bad for your health, but it is the way things are moving. So Councillor Devine's point, I think, is valid, that as more and more things move onto screens, we need to make sure that most people have got access. And I'd like to ask Alan, finish by asking Alan a specific point. It's okay to talk about black fibre optics. I mean, in the last decade, I think, or certainly the last 5 years, there's been a number of both Scottish Government and UK Government projects about connectivity and about the internet, about improving rollout. But I think the problem in the village communities may be, it's okay talking about black fibre optics or optic fibre, but is it not the case the real problem might be the conduit? In other words, if they're still using old copper cables, I think if the infrastructure of the internet in these villages is not good, that still means surely there'll be a problem.
The intention of the investment in relation to the infrastructure would be supporting fibre to the home or fibre to the premises, Councillor Doig. So this next generation of fibre infrastructure investment is about removing, I think what you referred to often is the case, even where there is fibre connections, it's only to a certain point in the infrastructure, and from the, if you like, the box, the connection to homes is then old copper technology, which restricts the performance. This next generation of infrastructure investment is about bringing black fibre connectivity direct to the premises, so that would be direct to the home or direct to the business. So it removes that. So it's very much leading edge infrastructure investment.
So it's a step forward. Okay, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Convener.
Yeah, we'll get there, Councillor Doig. I think we're of an age where resistance is futile.
Well, I just can't work half these things. It's just...
Well, so there's no other questions on this one. Can we agree? Item 4, digital strategy. Agreed. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 5, car parking in Paisley Town Centre. Councillor McCartan.
Yes, Councillor, and apologies again for coming late. I take it you can hear me?
Yes.
That's okay. Yeah, when this was discussed before, you may recall that I was very concerned about all the other car parks in the town that, instead of being free, had particularly on a Saturday, we're then going back to having to pay all the time. I don't know whether. I mean, my concern is that, do we really need another 6 months? I know I've certainly experienced the 3-hour parking, and it seems to work extremely well. And I would be much keener to see it just rolled out far quicker than it is, and not have to wait the other 6 months, because I feel that there's an awful lot of people missing out on some free parking, and as I say, I've experienced it myself, think it's fine, and I just wondered what people feel about it. I just feel it's unfair to keep it going for another 6 months with people losing out for that other 6 months. Thank you.
Okay. I'll bring in Gordon a minute. Councillor McIntyre, do you have a question the same issue? Okay.
So, sorry, Convener, I've got a question in the next item. I think it was Councillor McNaughton.
All right. Oh, sorry, it's underneath the screen here. Sorry, John. Councillor McNaughton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. It was just I fully support the extension for another 6 months. I think the COVID has got in the way of doing an evaluation. I think it has been successful. There are indications of that. But I also think we need to be cognizant of the pandemic and what is happening across the world in many cities. And there's been a transformational step change in modes of transport, particularly to away from public transport to cycling and walking. And we need to be aware of that in terms of building better out of the pandemic. But this extension of 6 months will allow us to review all of that and see where we are in the pandemic position as well.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
I'd be happy to extend it for another 6 months, although if there's another wave, we might need to extend it to another 6 months after that. But I think we've worked pretty good with the businesses in Paisley, so I think we should at least give them another 6 months to find out exactly what Gordon needs to make up a complete report that we can make a decision on.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just say to Councillor McCartan as well, although this is referenced in the working group, this was the delayed response. The reason why the 6 months has to go ahead is to provide the data and the information that we need to make a valued judgment on what needs to be done. And also, we're doing an economic recovery plan, which will come to the full council, I believe, in December, which will encapsulate what we need to do with the overall whole of Renfrewshire with regards to economic development. So at the moment, this particular paper is to try and support that work, because we do need to have the information, we do need to have the data. I've been speaking with Paisley First over the past week or so when they put in the request for the working group, and asked them to give us what their ask was. And I've asked the officers to go and look at that ask. What will that mean? So that when the working group comes back together again, we've got all the information there, and it cuts down, it truncates the time, the decision. But underneath all that, we do need to have all that data coming in to support any changes we might think is required to support the businesses in Paisley going forward. So as I say, we're accepting the fact that there'll be a review of the parking arrangements, but how that review will look like has to be underpinned by real data in that respect, because a lot of people can claim a lot of things about parking, about their own personal experiences, but we really need to have that data, because the council will need to make a good value-based decision on it, because there's a bit of investment behind it required, because all the parking meters are a bit outdated. So there's a lot more behind it needing done to support any decision that we come to. So as I say, we're listening to what people are saying on it, including Paisley First and local businesses. So if there's no more questions on that, can we agree the recommendation? Agreed, thank you. Item 6, adult social care and integration. Any questions on it? Councillor McIntyre, did you say you had a question on that one? No. Okay.
John, you're mute. You need to unmute. Thanks.
Councillor McIntyre, I think you indicated a minute ago it's the next item, then we're on the next item now. Are you?
Sorry, Councillor McIntyre, you're back on mute. You came off and then went back on again.
We were all warned at the start of the meeting not to keep pushing the button.
Next Thursday's going to be a riot.
Right.
That's you now, Councillor McIntyre.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. No, my question is just 4.4 on testing. I've had some constituent representations about people receiving visits from carers in the community and for other services, and there was a concern that although the care home staff are getting tests, that people doing these visits are not subject to routine testing. And I know these are essential services. They're one of the few things that we're allowing people to enter the home for. I wonder if I could have a comment on what's in place and if there are plans to introduce testing.
Okay, I'll bring in David Leese once we gather up any of the particular questions that are on this one. Councillor Cameron.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was just a section in community health and wellbeing. Councillor Devine rightly reflected on the financial constraints people will be under and poverty, but I think this section obviously shows that the HSCP are prepared for the human cost of COVID, and people being isolated, people being in poor mental health and bereavement. So I just think it's a really good piece of work that the officers in the strategic planning group that our third sector partners are involved in have looked at here, and we're well prepared for the human cost as well as the financial cost. And this recovery and renewal plan is really positive and will dovetail along with economic recovery. So it's just to say that yeah, I welcome that, and also just to say that I'm now the social isolation and loneliness champion, but we're actually looking at connectedness as well and about how we can connect with people. And unfortunately, Councillor Doig, part of that is laptops and tablets, but anyway, that was all.
You need to pay me a visit then, Councillor Cameron.
We'll work out the acronym for that later on. David Leese, are you able to?
Yeah, just to thanks again for the question, Councillor, and the opportunity to respond. By way of a reminder, we've currently still continue to operate under very clear guidance around COVID secure practice for all of our frontline staff, which is shaped by Health Protection Scotland. And in the light of the recent additional restrictions of social movement, we've been reiterating and recommunicating and reminding all of our staff about safe practice. The second point, just to remind members about, is that the only group of staff that so far are benefiting from routine weekly testing is those staff who are working in a care home or residential home setting. And those staff undertake those tests using the UK government portal, and there has been some reported issues about the delays in getting results back from that, which we continue to make representations about and hope to see some improvements on that. For all other frontline staff, then there isn't routine testing. and I would include in that care at home staff, but it's the same for all staff across the frontline services of health and social care, whether they're working in a hospital setting, a GP practice, or other community-based services like district nursing, health visiting, and care at home. But those staff do work under the guidance of managers and under the framework of the Health Protection Scotland guidance. So where staff are working with any service user where they're delivering a care at home service, then they continue to practice by using PPE, hand sanitizing and hand washing before they enter the house, social distancing when they're in the house, hand sanitizing on exiting the house, changing of PPE. So they're still operating under that very clear guidance and that's been in place now for some 25 weeks or so. There currently isn't any plans that I'm aware of to introduce routine testing for those staff, because it's been the case that we've seen that kind of high level of practice consistent with that guidance. It's also worth flagging that where we do have any service users who are living in their own home, who are known to us to be symptomatic or even COVID positive, we continue to provide a service. We have staff who volunteer to provide that service if other staff choose not to, and we make sure that we continue to provide them with that care at home service, again practicing with the levels of PPE that would normally be in place, and making sure that we are more attentive than normal to issues such as infection control, social distancing, and those kind of things. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but I thought it was an opportunity to also just remind members about some of the arrangements that are in place, which I hope was helpful.
Okay, thank you. All right, that Councillor McIntyre. Okay, that's I like the shortcut. Right, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, convener. I wasn't really planning on coming in here, but given that Radio Scotland this morning was talking about it, and the very sad situation for elderly people in homes, care homes, who can only see two members of a family when, and you know, so many elderly people, they live for the next meeting with their children or grandchildren. It seems very sad, and some of these elderly people are just on the brink of turning up their toes just because of the difficult situation that they're in. Is there anything we can do to make their life more interesting and open it up more so they can meet with family and more than just two specific named people? I don't know if that's the case in Renfrewshire, but it seemed a very sad situation that I was listening to this morning.
Okay, I think if David wants to come in and try and have a go at that one, I think because Renfrewshire Council is in a local lockdown as well, some of the information you're now getting on radio it will not be pertinent to all of Scotland in a sense, because we're under different measures as well as part of the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board area. But if David can come in and enlighten us about how to make elderly people's lives more interesting, it's
thanks, Leader, and thanks for the question, Councillor McLaren. And I wasn't able to tune into the radio this morning, so I didn't hear that particular piece on the radio, and I'm sorry to hear about that, and also clearly it was distressing to listen to. So I think the important point is that to remind everybody that we've continued to have visiting in certain circumstances for some considerable time now, but it's mainly outdoor visiting. And I think in the light of the earlier questions on other matters, then that visiting is obviously got its limits because it's outdoor visiting, and many of the care homes have made provision for that with the introduction of kind of safe spaces for that visiting outdoors with gazebos, so that the weather doesn't have too much of an impact. But of course, that does have that is very, very limited in terms of the extent to which that visit can have that normal, personal, and kind of intimate kind of experience that it would normally be. Though that we were on a journey. My second point will be we were on a journey to open up indoor visiting in a very controlled way with one named family member per resident under the the jurisdiction that now sits with the Director of Public Health. She asked that those arrangements were paused in the light of the increase in the infection rates right the way across Greater Glasgow and Clyde area when the first phase of lockdown took place in Glasgow, East Renfrewshire and Western Bartonshire. But she put a pause on all of those plans to open up indoor visiting, and then that has been restated in the light of the widening of those arrangements now covering Eastern Bartonshire and Renfrewshire. So I am very aware of that. The third point I would say is, though, that almost all the nursing homes that we have locally that we're aware of do have very dynamic, very proactive staff, provide the very highest levels of care. They have lots of programs to ensure that residents have a socially stimulating and socially active experience whilst they are resident in those homes. But I do accept in making that statement that for the last 25 weeks or so, that social stimulation and social interaction has been limited to the confines of the home. And I think members don't need to be reminded about the risks that many people living in a care home will have with regard to COVID, and therefore they've had to be in that kind of local lockdown and be restricted in their own movement, both within and certainly outside of the care home. So I do empathise, councillor, with the situation, but our daily contact with care homes confirms that they continue to have that kind of dynamic, proactive approach to making sure that people don't experience that social isolation within the home, and they do continue to have those programs that are stimulating for residents wherever they possibly can. But of course, that's within the midst of a pandemic, which will have limitations on people's ability to interact with visitors and family members.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Hart. Are you muted?
Hopefully.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put my hand
Just
up.
like to say, did they say that? Are you there, Jim?
Councillor Hart is still on mute.
Yeah, he's pushing the button.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put my hand up there, sorry.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Patterson, do you want to come in, a question?
Yes, please. It was just more of a comment than a question, and I heard part of the radio programme that Councillor McLaren referred to, and whilst I totally appreciate the concerns, obviously, for the kind of mental health and the well-being of the population of our care homes, given how this pandemic started and the hold it had in our care homes at the beginning, I'm very much of the mind that we need to act with such caution before opening them back up. Now, I know family visits are an integral part. I myself don't get to visit my own grandmother as much as I usually do, although she's resident at home, but being in Glasgow and me and Renfrewshire are both under local lockdown makes it difficult. But I would definitely want to err on the side of caution. I like what David's saying about one named family member at first, because we see what happens when this virus takes hold in our care homes. It can spread very fastly, very quickly, and amongst the most vulnerable group when it comes to the symptoms of this virus. So whilst I take his point about the sympathy I have for them, we just need to be so careful here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Yeah, Jim beat me to it, but I just want to endorse those comments as well. I've seen a lot of chat and a lot of debate about whether it's more harmful for people to be isolated and missing family members. But yeah, I mean, we need to caveat with what the alternative is, and you know, as Jim said and as David pointed out, the issues that the whole of Scotland were really criticised heavily for at the beginning. So I think that if we were to open our care homes up and things were disastrous, then you know these debates, you know, just would be null and void. And also just to reflect what David was saying, there's some really good examples of activities coordinators and what they're doing in care homes to keep people active and to keep them socially connected. So just wanted to reflect on that and yeah, and endorse the previous comments.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, Councillor Devine, is that your hand up?
Just a very, I don't know, Jim Hart, just a very quick one. It's not just about the state of mind of the people in the homes. It's the state of mind of the people whose relatives, wives, husbands, their state of mind has got to be looked at as well. But I do agree that you know, the last thing we need is COVID to get back into any care home throughout Great Britain, because it is devastating, as we found out only too well here in Renfrewshire. So I think we also need to, as I say, we also need to think of the mental state of the people who can't get in. So that's all.
Right. Thanks for those comments. I don't see any other questions on that one. It was a good discussion around it. Can we agree item 6, adult social work service update?
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, thanks very much. Item 7, Renfrewshire leisure update. Any particular questions on that? Councillor Hughes, you have your hand up.
I have got my hand up, but it's a comment rather than a question, as you'd expect, Ian, I think. There's been a thread of health and wellbeing all throughout the discussion today, and I think the paper shows exactly what Renfrewshire Leisure has been doing to support that, despite the fact that people have been very limited in being able to get their house for quite a significant period over the last 6 months. Our staff have delivered some really innovative practice. They've supported people socially, and they've supported people who have been isolated, which has also undercut the discussions today. So I want to say thank you to the staff for developing new processes really quickly so that we can support people, and also to our constituents and customers who have borne with us during this time. I know that we are now opening our leisure centres and that we've had libraries open for a while, but there was a long time where people couldn't get to do things which are everyday things for them to do and which are part of their social connection, and people have been really respectful and really patient and waited for us to be able to open things when it's safe to do so. And I want to reassure people as well, because there's been a lot of discussion around people who are perhaps not so connected, or people who maybe can't access things, and we will quite likely be in a situation for a long time where there are people who feel comfortable going to leisure centres and going to events, and people who really don't. And I want to reassure my colleagues that we will make sure that there are services so that all people can access in some way, whether that's physically or online, because I've personally used the online services over the period to access my physio support, and it's been really crucial to well-being. So yeah, no, just thank you to the staff, and thank you for everybody for being very patient.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I think we can echo the sentiments about all the organisations that operate, including the council, obviously, in Renfrewshire over the period. It's not been an easy task opening up buildings and making sure you're complying with all the guidance and safety. So I think we can agree with that sentiment. There's no other questions on that. Can we therefore agree item 7, Renfrewshire Leisure Update Report? Agreed. Okay. Item 8, Renfrewshire's Cultural Recovery and Renewal Funds. Chef Fund. There's no questions. Can we agree? Oh, what are you doing? All right, I see it. Sorry, I see your hand. All right, Councillor Doig.
No, I'd just like to really welcome this item, convener. I think it takes account of the changed situation in relation to COVID and how it's affected local culture and artistic bodies.
Sorry, somebody's not muted and I can hear the TV or something going in the background.
She was unlucky at Chepstow because the ground was quite soft, and although she went on it, the winner was...
We're getting gardening tips.
A little bit stronger than her, and just got through that race a little bit better. So
I'm going to suggest that's horse racing when you're talking about the ground being soft.
All right. Well, it just shows you I don't do horse racing.
Right, okay.
Right, thanks.
Is it okay to continue?
Right, okay.
I think there's 2 points that are extremely welcome in this report, convener. The first is there's a change in how the review panel is going to be composed, and I think that's positive, because under the old chef funds, whether it's real or imagined, there was a perception that it maybe wasn't as representative as it could have been, and I think that was the case. If you recall, under the chef funding, there was bodies like Lochrannoch Arts Festival and the Johnson Phoenix Theatre Group that I think would have been valid and worthy recipients, but for some reason never made the criteria. So I'm hopeful that with the widening of the review panel, this will give other organisations like these a better chance. And I think looking at things like the cultural organisations support, this is the kind of funding that might exactly help bodies like the Lochlannoch Arts Festival, because whilst they're not businesses, they do need to make a small profit to survive and continue. So I'm hopeful that there's a lot of positive elements in this report, Convener, and I'm hopeful that it will help bodies like the Lochlannoch Arts Festival, Johnson Phoenix, others that will be known to all other members in their own wards. But I think this is a really positive report and a positive development. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Sheridan is waving. Is that a cry for help?
Put the racing off now.
Is he winning?
Just as it came to the 2 o'clock at Yarmouth as well.
Record it and play it back.
Aye. But anyway, Ian, thanks for that. But it's just to make a comment. It's difficult to discuss heritage in Renfrewshire or indeed Paisley without mentioning the Small Shop event, which is probably the most popular event throughout the whole of Renfrewshire. And it's always well attended by certainly the kids and the general public, the parade. For many years now, I've attended the last 20 years of this event, and we've always tried to keep politics out of the event, and we've succeeded in doing that. But in the last year or so, there has been indications that politics is creeping into this event. And just to remind people, this event is a celebration of workers against unscrupulous employers, and that's what it was all about. But just in recent years, politics is creeping in with some fringe organisations trying to capitalise or hijack this event, and that's extremely unfortunate. And not only are they allowed to do it, but they're given a position of prominence in the parade. And I would like the organisers and indeed the assessors for funding, etc., to take that into account, because last year was unfortunate when we seen what looked like people dressed up like the Flintstones handing out sweeties to the Waynes. That's really not acceptable. And it's just to remind us what this event is about, and it's a celebration of the workers. That's the important thing. Okay, I think, Councillor Sheridan, I know you raised this in the past at the Leadership Board, and I'm pretty sure the officers have taken your views on board since that last time as well. And obviously the Small Shop Parade, like a lot of other events, has been impacted by COVID this year as well. So I'm pretty sure a lot of these events and organisations will be re-evaluating how they put on their events if COVID is still with us as the time goes on. So it's important that we monitor it on a day. Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Councillor McCartan.
That's it. You hear me now? Yeah. Yes, I like the idea of the review panel, and I think we've spoken about it already. Just in terms of the fact that I have occasionally been a bit critical of some of the decisions that were being made in the past in terms of some of the awards, and that seem to all be very much focused from the assessment by the staff. I think the fact that you're introducing some councillors into the review panel, it helps to open it up. It helps to perhaps put some structure on it, and probably it'll help the officers, because it'll get them me off their back if I continue to moan about some of the awards that are being made. And I know we did talk about the possibility of my being the nominated person from the board. I don't know if that's a decision that needs to be taken today or not, but I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you.
Councillor, who have we got next? Councillor Devine.
Well, I'd just as Eileen said there, I'd be interested to know who she was talking to about taking up position in the board. But in that case, I would put my name forward for the board as well.
Okay.
Well, if you notice, it's one councillor from the RLL board and one councillor out with the RLL board that is supposed to be going on to it, as far as I can see.
It's if anybody's got an interest in it, just send in your interest. That's the way it is just now, because it is.
Who'll make the decision then, Chair?
Sorry?
Who will make the decision on who gets on it?
Well, if there's interest come in, and then it's a question of we just agree who the most relevant people are to go on it. I say, so if you're putting your name forward, Eddie, I would suggest you just send it to Mary Creedy.
I'll send it to Mary as soon as I can find out how to work this keyboard.
Right, okay. Right, Jim. Right, Jim.
Is that me up?
Aye, Councillor
What I
Patterson,
want to say, I don't want a place on the board, so I'll say that straight away. So I'm not going to, hopefully a fight won't break out. But what I did want to say is, I welcome the report. I think what we're seeing in this report is local government at its best here, because obviously there's been quite a lot of support for various cultural organisations from both governments, Scottish and the UK. However, there is always gaps, and the not-for-profit was a big gap in this. Places like Pace Theatre and others that are not-for-profit kind of fell through that gap. So I think we've got to thank the officers and commend them on thinking quickly to repurpose the Chef Fund for this purpose, because the last thing we need is our artistic freelancers going down the pan, because let's face it, with the continued lockdown, it's very unlikely that these folk will return to what would be normal business for quite some time. Even when we can start planning events again, we're talking we'll be planning for later next year, so there's no immediate benefit to them. So definitely this fund is going to be a great source of support for many, and I certainly welcome it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McNaught. John, he's went off the screen. Where is he?
Thanks. It was really, again, to welcome this report, and just a quick question. I'm not sure if it's possible to answer at this stage, but in terms of the 200,000 across the three categories, cultural organisations support, the artist development grants, the town centre and neighbourhood creative installations, do you have a feeling of how that will split across between those three categories, or is it very much dependent on demand?
Okay, I'll bring in Mary Creedy in a minute, once we've sort of rounded up all the questions, if there's any. Councillor McGurk.
Right, thanks very much for that, Canberra. No, really, just like Councillor Patterson, I just wanted to make a couple of comments on it and welcome the report and look forward to the energy it should bring, hopefully positive energy next year when we're actually able to implement it. And like the question that John McNaughton was asking, I'd like the answer on that one too, please. Thanks.
Okay, can I ask Mary if she wants to come in and reply to Councillor McNaughton's particular question, I think?
Yes. We didn't stipulate the levels between the different categories purposely because we wanted to get a sense of where the applications were coming from. But as you'll see from the text under the three categories, there's likely to be larger maximum awards towards the cultural organisations. So I would expect that there might be a bigger proportion go towards the organisational support, but that's something that we'll assess as the applications come forward.
Okay, you all right with that, Councillor McNaughton? Yeah, fine. Okay, there's no other question this one. Can we agree recommendations in item 8?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, thanks very much, everyone. I think that's us reached the end of the agenda. It's been a pretty good meeting today. Thanks very much, everyone, for your attendance. And it all seems to have worked quite well, technological wise.
Ian, Jim Sheridan's.
Oh, Jim, you're waving again. I thought you were waving bye-bye.
No, Ian, it's just to ask if you'd very kindly stay on at the end for a couple of minutes to have a private word.
Yes, okay. No problem, thanks. Okay, that's okay, everybody. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
If this private